All right, I'm going to ask everyone to rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I would like to make,
Okay, before you do that, I'm going to ask, our secretary is absent, so I'm going to ask Julie to be appointed secretary. And I do have, there was a slight snafu in the agenda, and this is my fault. I read this wrong. Last week you discussed the renewal of administration contracts. Tonight we're discussing the raises, which will be discussed by the finance committee, but we need to approve the administration contract. So I need a motion to add the approval of administration contracts under C3. So can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to add administrator contract renewals to action item C3.
I have a second.
Second.
So first by Sarah, second by Chris. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we will move the approval of the renewal of administration contracts under C3. Okay, next is citizen comments. Do we have any citizens? No citizen for comment. Celebrations. I'm going to turn that right over to Adam.
All right, well, we've had quite a bit to celebrate since our last meeting, or some events that occurred just before our last meeting. So I'll kind of go in order of the stories that are posted on the website. So the first one is our Business Professionals of America organization competed in the state conference in Grand Rapids and had 10 students involved with 10 different events placed in the top 10 in those various events. So kind of is in keeping with a long tradition of success with Mrs. Claxton's program and BTA at the high school. And so congratulations to her and all the students involved with that event. Next, we had one of our students, Liz, at the high school was the winner of both prizes at the Michigan State University Federal Credit Union Art competition. As you probably saw in a lot of the correspondence that was going out during the month of February. We were actively engaged in trying to get community members to go in and vote and support our student artist as part of the competition. And there's just some phenomenal work that's gone by area students at that event. But Liz earned both of the major awards that were part of that competition. And congratulations to all involved. And Megan Kulu, who is the art teacher at the high school, for continuing the great work she's doing with our students there. Next, we won another individual state wrestling championship a couple weeks ago. That's our 4th in 4 years and our 7th state athletic championship in the last 3 years. So as a lot of people say, that's pretty good for little Williamston. So congratulations to Cam and his family and the wrestling program for supporting him and earning another outstanding award. And we got another picture to put up on our wall champions up at the weight room. And then lastly, not a posted story, but just recently we had 2 of our students at the Wilson Town Center Awards dinner earn scholarships. I'll have an update about that in my buzz update that comes out on Friday. The 2 of our students that attend Wilson Town Center earn scholarships. I think cumulative total about $1,500 for their contributions to that program. So congratulations in advance of that announcement to them. That is, those are our celebrations this evening. Any questions?
Have any questions for Adam? All right. Who would you like me to turn over our education update to? Our furry friend, or would you like to?
Well, I guess I can do it if you'd like. So we have,
I would love for her to come up here and sit on my lap.
Well, we have Greg and Serenity from EDK9 that are here to talk a little bit about their program, and of course, probably the star of the show, as usual, is Gemini, who's our detection dog, and hopefully she's recovered a little bit from a long day at work today. But you're welcome to come up and share with the board a little bit about your role and anything else that you'd like them to know.
Okay. Yeah, so this is, I don't know if you want to do like the whole podium.
Actually, if you stand at the podium, there's a microphone there,
Oh.
so people, not necessarily so we can hear, but we tape this, we're live,
Okay.
so people who are sitting at home.
Do you want me, is it on right now?
It's on,
Okay.
you don't have to touch anything. It's
Perfect.
right there.
Yeah, so I'm Serenity, and this is Gemini, and we are the new dual purpose team. That's at the schools. We rotate between all 3 schools. So she serves to be a detection dog, to serve as a deterrent, and she also serves as social support to help the students and to help with mental health. So,
Should we ask questions? Are you ready?
sure.
So, does she go home with you at night?
Yes, she lives with me.
And then were you part, so when she was trained to be a detection dog, service dog, all of that, did you take part in that training, or did she get trained and then you two were introduced to see if it was a good fit?
So it's a mix of both. She's been in training since she was a puppy, since she was born, really, as far as the socialization aspect and building confidence. And then as far as her scent-specific training was started a little bit before I joined the picture, and then we were introduced and we actually worked together at that point. So that's where we trained for a little over a month together, and we certified together. So whenever there's a dog and handler team, they certify as a team. So if she was to go work with somebody else, that person, they would have to certify as a team together too. So
what does your average day look like?
So average day is, it's always a little bit different every day, right? As things go. But we tend to rotate between the 3 different schools in some form. We like to keep the schedule relatively random, just so that it doesn't turn into something that's predictable for anybody. But as far as that goes, I rotate between the 3 schools and spend time with the students at each school, helping support them. We mix between doing our sweeps and having her check areas of high probability throughout the school. We are a presence that serves as a deterrent, knowing that there's a detection dog in the school. I speak with members of the community all the time at the community center in the high school. And on top of that, it's also a lot of social support for the students, of course. They love her, and that really makes both of our days, where we're interacting with the students, and there have been several experiences where, we sit with troubled students or ones that have been having a hard time for some form or another, and it's just the smile on their face. That's our day to day, So we love it.
Just laying all over her, the kids.
Yes.
I see she's wearing a harness that says "Do not pet." So how do the students know when it's okay to pet her?
Yes, so the harness does say do not pet, and it was confusing a lot of people at first, but it's something that I explain is it's helpful for people to know that it's do not pet while she's working. So it serves as also a reminder, especially for the littler ones, to ask first before they pet her.
Sure.
So that's why that's there, is just do not pet her with the caveat of while she's working on her detection side.
The elementary principals did a screencast for their students. It was age appropriate, but in advance of Gemini coming into the building, so they did like a mini lesson on how to work with Gemini, what was the appropriate time to pet her, and to ask ahead of time. And there was also kind of a Cassie Fander Discovery for the real little ones did a nice lesson on just working dogs in general. So they talked about all different types of working dogs and then how that applies to Gemini's role. So I got to say, based on my observations, like the first day Gemini was at the elementary campus, the kids were super fired up, but already knew the protocol for how to interact with her.
It's funny that I joke that the elementary kids are the best about it, about asking first. They do really, really well.
I was gonna say,
say I've
saying,
never
but-
asked, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just joke with it, but that preparation was really amazing to see because I was prepared for the little kids and everything, but I've been really impressed with their impulse control. So.
Unlike some of the adults, but that's okay.
No, everybody's great.
Well, that's a
So.
good rule of thumb for kids to learn anyway, to ask before you pet someone's dog. I
Sure.
mean, just for safety, but.
Yeah.
So has Gemini detected anything?
No, she hasn't detected anything real in the school,
Okay.
as far as that goes, just to ease the minds, which is a good thing, you know, right? That's good to see. But we do hide things often in the school. I have training aids that are, you know, safe and stable, obviously, but that I'm able to hide so that she can practice, because that's super important for her to know and to keep her skills fresh and to know that this area is an option for you to be looking and for searching for the things that you're searching for. And then on top of that, we also train weekly as an entire team. All of us handlers get together so that the dogs continue to build experience in their skills.
So are there certain commands that that you have to give her so she knows, like, okay, I have to be alert, look for this? Or is she kind of alert, looking for this, smelling for this at all times?
Yes, so it's, you can see a little bit of an example here, but she's pretty alert all the time, but it's also a sense of sometimes I have to help her out a little bit. So that's why we are a team, right? So if there was something where the odor is very in your face and obvious, you will see where she will stop and she's working right now.
Yeah.
So you can see this is an example where sometimes she just goes and works on her own.
Yeah.
But sometimes if there are areas that wouldn't be obvious for her to search, I have to help her out. And that's where it's my job as a handler to present the area to her so that she can be in odor and detect what she needs to detect. So, so there are certain commands where I tell her check when she's doing that now. Yeah, so if I was to try to find something and I would tap on it or I would gesture towards it and I would tell her check, and so she would start to look to that as an opportunity for her to find something, and she would start sniffing that.
She would know that that's the cue.
Yes.
But they're actually, let me introduce myself. I'm Greg Gaitis. I'm the president and CEO of Elite Detection Canine. And first want to say thank you very much for our partnership with Williamston. We're very honored to be able to providing this service for you. And so to expound upon that a little bit more, she's always trained to be obedient to the odor as opposed to obedient to serenity. So when she walks in a room, her first impression is to search, right? To use her nose to see if there's anything that she's trained to detect. And again, as Serenity mentioned, it's important for her to find something here at school because they're smart enough, and that's why Serenity has training aids that she'll plant from time to time. It's important for Gemini to find something here. If she doesn't, she's smart enough, she'll just go through the motions and know there's never anything here. So, I just go through my day. So that's why it's important that she actually finds odor that she's imprinted on while here at school. So she knows this is a working environment.
That was a good addition. The obedience odor phrase, yes.
How many steps are you averaging?
Let me check. Yeah, it's 25 to 30,000. I'm at 27,000 right now.
Wow.
So.
It's funny because like on Fridays, at the end of the day, when like everyone's just really tired, right? Like last Friday, like Gemini was just dragging. Like you could tell it's Friday afternoon. She was exhausted. So.
Yeah, she always gets a second win when she gets home too. So it's pretty funny.
Ooh, I didn't think I get to play.
How old is Serenity?
She's almost 2. She'll be 2 in 2 months. Yep.
So do you see like this type of work for Gemini to be more broadly accepted across other schools and grant fund? I mean, is that something that I'm sure you work as on a day-to-day basis? And is that being very well received with politicians and people that create budgets for our schools and public places to be able to utilize scent dogs like Gemini?
That's a
More-
great question.
more often.
And yes, we're seeing a very much interest across the state. We actually worked with legislators last school year to have safety dogs, as we call them, part of the per pupil funding. So they were an allowable expense. And then prior to that, they weren't. And so we worked with several senators to have safety dogs as an allowable expense. And I know also here at Williamston, you receive some funding through the mental health allocation. And so that's part of what we do on an ongoing basis, is work with our state legislators to get this type of solution as an approved expense. And something that feedback that we've received from a lot of schools and school districts that we're in is sustainable funding. So to make sure that this is an allowable expense next year or years to come. So we're actually working with them this budget cycle to see if it could be a multi-year allocation as opposed to a year to year to year. So it's a great question. It's something that we feel very strongly about. We're actually the largest provider of safety dog teams, certainly in Michigan and potentially across the U.S. So something we're very passionate about because of the dual purpose. And it's a visual deterrent, right? A canine is really probably one of the only proactive solutions that you could provide from a firearm and explosive detection. Everything else is reactionary, right? Something has to happen for something else to happen. Where with Serenity and Gemini, they're here every day, and it's a visual deterrent, a proactive deterrent, to hopefully, minimize the probability of that event ever happening again.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's a great question.
We
Thank
love
you.
having her.
Yeah, I just like to emphasize the proactive. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, I get inundated with like sales pitches now, right? Because everybody knows schools got this categorical funding for safety. So there's like, all kinds of things. But they're almost all reactive. It's like something bad happens, and here's how we mitigate the really bad thing that just happened, or help you catch it 4 minutes after it happens instead of 10 minutes, which I don't know how much of a difference that makes. But this concept is getting out in front of it. And if nothing else, students having a bad day or is it a crisis? We've had some pretty dramatic events around here over the last month, as we all are well aware of. And Gemini's been instrumental in helping staff and students respond when they needed that additional support. So it's getting out in front of the issue versus responding to something that's already happened.
It's also a security piece. I do get a lot of parents that say, why don't you just put in metal detectors? Okay, it's not that easy, so this is, yeah.
It's not that easy, and it's not that, as a student, talk about mental health, walking
Right,
through
going
that
through
every
that.
morning must have to, make you feel safe. But I've just noted, the military uses dogs. It seems like every area of our population where we want to be proactive, we use dogs,
look at
but we
air-
don't in schools.
Look at airports today, right?
Yeah, so,
Canines at airports.
Yeah,
And
airports,
and the beauty of Serenity and Gemini compared to a metal detector, they're mobile, right? They
Right.
can go everywhere. They can do the parking lot. We've had in other school districts, something happened in one of the other schools where, let's say today Serenity was to be at the middle school, something was at the high school, she can immediately go and it is always available. And the other piece of it is, and it's been mentioned, is the social aspect. Our canines in other schools have been to the senior all-night party, they've been to the prom, they've been to graduation, so they really become part of your fabric here to utilize however you choose to use Serenity and Gemini. And that's really, we get our direction from Adam as to how to do that.
Do you know how many schools have, just in Michigan, have canines in their schools right now? Or
So-
how many that you service?
We are in 4 districts, and I know there's one other school that has a canine, or just starting, Plymouth Canton. They just started to bring in a canine team, and Oxford now has a team, and they're completely separate. So at Oxford, It's their school resource officer wanted to become the handler, and they went that route. And Plymouth Canton, it's the same thing. So their relationship is more with law enforcement, where we are the largest single provider of safety dog teams to school districts. And they're present. Serenity and Gemini are here every hour that the students are here, which I think makes a huge difference as opposed to coming and going on a random basis.
Right, absolutely.
Students are smart, they'll figure it out,
Yeah.
right? They'll see the trend. So,
Can you speak a little bit more about the therapy aspect besides allowing Gemini to be petted? What else, does Gemini do some things that there's been training provided for example, going student to student in some classrooms and allowing to be petted, or besides just going to a certain student that's troubled, what are the other therapy aspects?
so Gemini is not an official therapy dog, right? Her primary responsibility is firearm and explosive detection, but as we've talked about, she's a dog. And when she's not working, she functions as a pet. And really that's, and we leave that discretion to our handlers, right? Because they get to know the administration, the teachers, the students, and manage that on their own. But and I can tell you in other schools that we're in, the K-9, the Serenity counterpart will escort students that are having a bad day. They'll sit with them. So it's really at the school level, it's really at the principal's discretion as to how Serenity and Gemini would be used. And again, as you can see, she's a dog, a very good dog.
I can give some examples to some of the situations. So even just a handful I can think of between the last couple of days, I've done things where I've sat with a student who was involved in like just a mild just altercation, between students. And so afterwards I was sitting with her to help calm her down. I've escorted students that were wandering around and they were lost, and so I took them to the office where they're supposed to be, and they just got turned around. And she's also had students request to pet her. There was an assembly where some students were just personally affected by it in some way or another, and just emotionally. And so they requested to pet her after that as support. There's a lot that she can say that I can't. And that's something where I really respect her ability to be able to help in that way.
Something else that we've seen is, as you can see, Serenity is not law enforcement. And what we've seen in other districts where we've been there a while is the students will build a relationship with both Gemini and Serenity and are more apt to have a conversation with Serenity because she's not law enforcement, right? She's not carrying a gun, and really serve as an intermediary between the students and administration. And so we've seen that in other districts and expect the same to happen here, as they're here longer and get to know the students and faculty more. So
I think it's an amazing addition, and I'm very thrilled and excited that you're here.
we couldn't be happier.
Yes,
We are too.
thank you. We're happy to be here, so.
Great addition.
So one of the, I guess just in closing, or last thought on my part, remember we've set this up as a pilot, right? So part of some of the things you're asking are part of the things that we're kind of observing and kind of building a case for. It's also, of course, one of the reasons we want to bringing in some of those additional support resources to present to the board over the last several meetings, so you can become more aware of those capabilities. There is a plan for a survey at the end of the year. Ray was helpful in kind of already pre-packaging it, or some questions that we can use in advance to kind of get more feedback too from students and parents and staff in terms of the effectiveness. And so I think that'll be interesting to see those results when that comes back in later this summer.
Well, it's nice to see that she was up and kind of sniffing around, and I mean, if she was just laying on the ground the whole time, I'd be like,
I'm keeping her from doing some things.
That's okay. I mean,
Like if I walked her around, she would be checking everybody's bags.
If
So-
you'd like us to check your backpacks in person, we would be happy to.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm holding her, that's why I'm stopping.
She's like going, I gotta scan this room.
Yes, I'm
There's
stopping
too
her
many
from
people
doing
in
what
this
she wants to
room.
do, So
So is that kind of her first instinct when you walk into a room, that she just wants to scan it for
Yes,
everything?
yes, and that's where she's, a good detection dog is nosy, right? So,
Yeah.
oh,
And that's what that's what we train them to do, is to walk in the room and go to work.
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
supposed to kind of not care about what I'm doing, is the goal, so. She's dual purpose in that she'll check your bag and then say hi to you.
Do you smell my dog?
Yeah. Oh, I gotta shake that off.
And you know she likes you when you get the full rollover.
Mm-hmm. And then all the requests, yeah, and then you're friends forever at that
Yeah.
point, so.
You know, she's like, I'm gonna stay a little extra longer.
She's
here."
like, I know this person. She doesn't
Oh, I can't
ask for
resist.
permission. She just wants me.
I know, that's what Sarah was saying. It's like adults too, she helps.
I know this one's extra stressed.
Yeah. She sensed your stress after a day of numbers, like, we gotta go.
It's like, oh no, money, finances, this woman needs some love.
She hates to see anyone cry.
Aw.
It's even before, and she says, no, we can't have that. So, I'll just walk her around so you guys can see how you.
Oh, you're adorable.
I know. I think this is a great idea.
She eats up the compliments too.
I know the whole room's just been smiling the whole time she's been.
I know, we're like looking at her like, let her go, so we can pet her.
I'm sitting here like wrestling with her. She said, let me have it.
Mm-hmm. She's like, move on. We're moving on, no?
She is nice. Do we have any questions, more questions about him? I mean, she can
Thank you for what you're doing. I think it's great work.
Thank you.
and
Thank you. Thank you for the
I'm
opportunity.
glad that you don't let our society deter good thoughts and ideas, because I know we probably can.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, extra pets today.
She's like, oh my gosh. So is that her first instinct, to go to a bag? Like, is that something that
She typically does, yeah, especially, typically I'll walk her past things and that's where she gravitates towards.
Like, she'll go to a bag. That's her.
Bags, boxes, things like that, containers. A lot of it, we try to keep a wide variety in our training about where to hide things. I mean, we get real creative and it can be fun. Because the more things that she sees as options to check.
To check.
And the more pictures that are created for her, the more that she'll be able to, start to go out and say, oh, there might be something in
In
there.
there to look at. So were you, I just have one last question, because I could do this all night.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I love talking about it, so.
So before you actually showed up day one,
Mhm.
did you walk her around the buildings without people in the building? Or was it that, like, she could just start with everybody else and kind of just get the feel of the plan?
Yeah, it was pretty much day one, cannonball, so, but she's experienced a lot of this stuff before, right? So she's worked in a lot of school buildings prior to this one, for her training. We work in a lot of the schools with all the handlers for our weekly training, we work in schools. And so and a lot of the kids are still there after school, so she's familiar with that. And she was a little overwhelmed at first with the amount of students,
Yeah.
But after a week or so, she's walking through the halls and the bell rings now with everybody, just in the midst of all of it, so.
So we're real close to Avondale School District, you're one of our clients, and they let us train at the school after hours. So again, prior to Gemini coming here, she had already worked in a school system, scanning lockers, so she was aware of the environment.
The
And-
environment and,
Yep,
like-
and as Serenity mentioned earlier, that's part of their training, is environmental training in the environments in which they'll work.
Are there any other questions?
Serenity, one question for you is kind of your story. I mean, what made you decide you wanted to work with dogs?
Okay, are we ready for a story? So I have been dog crazy since I could speak. Since I was 3 years old, that's all I cared about. And so that's been something that I'm pretty sure is just my purpose in life, is dogs. And so from there, I mean, it just carried on from there. So I had my own dog when I was a kid. I trained him. I competed with him in sports. And then that moved on towards college, where I got my degree in animal science. I was pre-vet. And then I actually ended up going a different route into research. So I worked in industry in research for a little bit. And then the opportunity came up to be a dog trainer, and that position opened up. So I actually worked as a pet dog trainer for 2.5 years. I then have since then started my own dog training business. So I do that on top of this. So training dogs, working with dogs is something I'm very passionate about. So then I also found the opportunity to do this particular job, which I found out through a person that is on a search and rescue team that I'm on. So on top of having my own business, I also volunteer on a canine search and rescue team. So I have another working dog on top of her that's a volunteer search and rescue dog. So you could say dogs are my life.
You gotta be careful, because Dr. Lewis will get you on a podcast here.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah, I think she's next.
I listen to podcasts all the time.
Maybe.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
Yes, sure.
Well, thank you both so
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
We
Thank
are
you
so
so
very
much.
lucky to have you and to work
Absolutely.
with both of you. Do you have any other questions, anything else? May I ask, anything you want to add?
I was noticing all the scouts were
I know, they're all.
checking.
I know, they're already, the kids are just
Oh.
already.
They were all looking in.
We
Why
might
is there dog?
go bust up the party for a second.
Thank you both.
Well, thank you for
very
your
Thank
time
you
this
very
evening.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Superintendent's report.
Yeah, so back to normal stuff.
It's hard act to follow.
Yeah, there's upcoming events. So for the April meeting, Paige Paulson will be back to provide an overview of winter athletics and enrichment programming, as well as a preview of the spring. And then in May, we start with our ed update and handbook extravaganza. So we'll have the principals from Discovery and Explore here on in the first meeting in May to provide that information to the board. And then lastly, hot off the press, it's looking like for teacher appreciation in May, we'll be providing lunches, very similar format to last year on May 2nd. Hold on a second, make sure I have the dates right.
May 2, 4, and 5, I heard.
2, 4, and 5, yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No, that's not, that wouldn't make sense. Hold on, I'll pull up my calendar here. It's the first week of May, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
The 6th is
So
Sunday.
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4, yeah. If I could write 3 numbers in the same order, that would help. Yeah, so Tuesday, the 2nd, Wednesday, the 3rd, and Thursday, the 4th. So I'll have more information come out to the board on that once we get those details finalized, but it'll be during the normal school lunch periods for our staff. And then we are also working with the WEA and a couple of local businesses on solidifying a program similar to what we did last year with some of the downtown businesses, but looking like we'll probably go with a different local business, but a similar approach to what was done last year. So I will be able to solidify that once we have the last couple details. We're about 95% of the way there, but not quite ready for prime time yet. But I'll give an update to the board on that in April. That is a brief report for this evening, unless there's any questions.
Any questions for Adam?
No, thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. ISOA, Sarah.
So we met March 1st, and in this meeting, Jason Melma was our speaker, who is the superintendent. And Jason reviewed the book, Schools Cannot Do It Alone. All of us ISOA members received a copy. And Jason Vollmer, as I reported at our last meeting, is going to be speaking, and ISOA is one of the sponsoring organizations. He's going to be coming in October October 2nd. He went from criticizing public schools to being a huge public school supporter and advocate. If you would like to read the book, you're welcome to use my copy. Adam has my copy, so.
I think I got a couple, actually, so.
Okay, so you're welcome to grab one of ours. And Superintendent's Roundtable, John Hood gave us an update. He is the Okemos Public Schools Superintendent. He gave us some of the touch points were student perception survey, the Lansing School District and AM ISD have begun meetings to discuss Lansing's request to transition oversight of the Beekman Center programs to the ISD, school of choice discussion, and the big one was the school safety debrief. A large discussion was around the recent swatting hoax at Okemos High School and what was learned and what came out of that incident. And we reviewed and looked over the bylaws and elections for ISOA officers, and I was nominated as president and Monica Fink for vice president. And then, of course, there were district updates. That is all. Any other questions?
Any questions for Sarah? All right, Chris, facilities.
We had a
Not facilities.
lively meeting for finance.
Finance. Facilities.
That lasted a while, and actually all of our discussion items are coming from that meeting. So I won't spend a ton of time during my report because we're going to spend a lot of time discussing it. But we did talk about, and we will have a report on a budget amendment from Sarah tonight. We talked about a couple of additional items to be put onto ballots coming up in both 2024 and 2025, a Headley restoration, as well as a bond extension that we'll be talking about tonight. We already mentioned that we will be voting on contracts, and we talked about those contracts at the meeting. We had an update on our sinking fund, as well as ESSER budget, and finally a social media class action lawsuit. So all of these are on discussion, so I'm just going to leave it at that because I know we can talk more when we get into the individual items.
Okay. So then moving into discussion items. Sarah.
Sarah, let me
Come on
move
down.
over to
Where's my green one?
I'm coming. I'm working on it.
Okay, so I'm not as exciting as Gemini, but I'll try to just make it quick.
Yes, you are.
Thank
Yes,
you.
are.
Okay, so yes, I am presenting our 22-23 budget amendment. You'll see here, like always, that first column is our amended amount, second column is our original, and then the last is the difference between those two. We're expecting about $25.4 million in revenues and $24.9 million in expenditures, and that is going to leave us with about a $528,000 contribution to fund balance. Next slide, please. So these are our revenue adjustments. Our MIPSER's rate subsidy increased about $200,000. That's the state's contribution to our retirement. Special education increased about $120,000 from originally budgeted. We also received 5 different state categoricals this year. The total allocations of those are actually $555,000, but that $337,000 I have listed there is what we actually expect to spend this year, and then we can carry those and spend those next year. So those categoricals are our 31AA mental health, which is how we pay for Gemini. All the section 97, so there's 97, 97C, and 97D. And then the 98C learning loss. And sorry, the 97s are the security and safety. And then there, at the bottom of that state top section is 123 worth of miscellaneous adjustments across state aid funding. So then into our federal ESSER ARP, that increase there is really just reflecting the timing of ESSER. So when we prepared the original budget back in May, of 2022, it was hard to know whether certain items would be billed on or after that June 30 cutoff, so that's just reflecting those settling into place. We also started implementing our after-school intervention program through 11T, and that is going well. So, which we obviously did not previously budget for because we didn't even have 11T approved at that point. And so then that is reflected in our increase of $535,000 for ESSER and ARP. Health resource advocate, so Heather Lewis, she presented last meeting. This is her position as well as a new secretary, Diane Evans. They are covered via this line item. That was another one through, when we did our original budget, we knew this was coming. We didn't know the amount. Actually, no, sorry. This one, we didn't even know if it was going to come or not, but we were hopeful. That next one there, child care stabilization. We did know that one was coming, but also not the correct amount, and so that was not included at the time of the original budget, so that's just picked up there. We are using that to purchase the playground equipment that Rebecca brought to you a few meetings ago, as well as our Kids Corner salaries and benefits. So then we're down to the title and at-risk funding. So our title funding was just about cut in half this year from prior year, and that's been decreasing each year, unfortunately. Well, it's due to good things happening, so I guess it's not too unfortunate. But and then we got a pretty large increase in our at-risk funding. So those netted together to an increase of $62,000. And then that last item there is just a $15,000 miscellaneous adjustment. Next slide, please. Thank you. Our expense adjustments. So the first one is about $605,000 in salary and benefits. That's due to a number of items. First is that we hired our middle school assistant principal. We also increased our substitute daily rate by a bit more than we originally planned so that we could stay competitive. We added a number of Appendix A positions, which you guys have been approving periodically throughout the year. And then, of course, just increases in retirement and health benefits that come with inflation and all that. Let's see there. Increasing contingency fund. So that is really just the $100,000 set aside to help cushion our fund balance contribution. Increase in utilities of $173,000, mostly due to inflation. That's our fuel for our buses, natural gas, electricity, etc. ESSER 2 HVAC updates, a decrease of $194,000. That is due to those, same as I mentioned in the revenue section, the expenditures from this summer falling pre-June 30, and so they just got picked up last year. ARP ESSER 3 expenses, again due to timing, and that's just finalizing how those fell. 11T equalization, we did get that approved budget, so that's why there's quite a big bump there. Yep, and that's the one I left off completely when we did the original budget. Fund balance. So yes, as I mentioned, we do expect to contribute about $528,000 to fund balance. That is including the $100,000 set aside for the contingency fund that I mentioned, bringing us to a balance of $4.5 million or 18.3% of expenditures. And just a note, I do believe that to be conservative at this time. Any questions?
Wow. I just always want to point this out. Look at the very left column. I think it is 2013-14.
Yes.
Yep, it
To
is.
where we are now. I do, as I was talking to Adam, just periodically, before this board meeting happened, you know, we got a nice new computer from the tech department working, and, you know, there was a time where we did not have money to do that, and we had past board members who were really comfortable living in that, like, space of where, with Lord, we have nothing, and who knows how we're gonna keep going if something major happens. So I am thankful every day that this board made this a goal and said we cannot live in that area anymore. And I thank you and Adam and everybody who's scraped and found out how we could get this, because it's much
we do have an impending fiscal cliff coming, which Adam and I will be attending some seminars on that in the morning tomorrow. So we will
Couldn't call it a
probably.
hill, a mountain.
No, it's a cliff. It's a big cliff.
That's okay. I'm okay with like from where we were.
Yeah.
there's-
Yes.
But we have a fund balance to support
Yeah,
that
right.
amount,
Like
where
we have-
before we
where
did it.
We had
Yes.
nothing.
Yeah.
So, it was pretty scary, so I thank you for all your hard work,
Yes.
everybody.
Ain't that-
Any questions on this? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Sarah.
welcome.
Next, okay, so this is kind of where we get a little confusion, and this is on me, I take full responsibility of this. Administrator contract recommendations. So, last, 2 weeks ago, you had the administration renewal contract, so we're just voting tonight to renew our administrators' contracts. This administration contract, I'm not sure who wants to take this. This is the raises that we will be giving our administrators. That's what this is. So tonight we're doing their contract. This is the finance part of this. So I'm
It's
not sure
just
who
a
wants to.
discussion.
Yeah, I'm gonna let
Right,
Sarah.
it's just up for discussion, but I do want
Yeah.
everybody to understand,
Yes, they're two
typically when we're
separate
doing
things.
staff contracts, it kind of comes together, they're a negotiated bargain, the contract and the salary raise and everything comes together. Here, we have to do them in two separate things.
Yep.
So tonight, it is just the contract, not the raise. 2 weeks or whenever our next meeting is in April, we will be talking about the raises, so two separate things.
So, yeah, I'm gonna have Sarah talk about this, because she did a deep dive looking at our contracts, where our administrators are, and where some of the competitive districts are as well. So
Yeah,
Sarah.
so I just wanted to walk through this spreadsheet. I know it's a lot of ugly numbers, and make sure everyone understood what you're looking at. So I did want to ask if you could hold questions to the end, because there is a possibility, or pretty good possibility, I will address it, but of course, at the end, if there is something I can tackle, let me know. Okay. First of all, Finance Committee, you will notice this spreadsheet is different from the one that I originally brought to you last week. It's the same information, it's just set up so you can see the exact same comparison for all positions, where if you recall from last week, I had one for our building admins and one for our central office, and this is more of an equal comparison for you to look at. Okay, so Adam went through, contacted all the districts, got the salary information for these positions we've listed here. You'll see the positions on the left, and then the districts across the top. Central office administrators are above that bold black line, and then the building admins are below that line. If a district provided a salary schedule, so like our teachers, you go up steps as opposed to one flat rate, you will see that I listed 3 different amounts for them. So for reference, if we look at Frankenmuth curriculum director, you'll see the low end is 108, the high end is 129, and so any of these comparisons I did, I always use the middle amount, that 119, so the average. So at the top of the sheet, you will see, we listed enrollment, fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, because we were trying to look at different ways, the best way to evaluate how to compare these, because every district is a little bit different. What we decided to do is base these on our enrollment, or have enrollment be the driver in the comparison, since enrollment is what drives our revenue and therefore our ability to compensate. So, you will see the salmon colored boxes at the top. You'll see we have the average listed as well as the percentage below comparable districts. Our enrollment is highlighted there in yellow with the 6.2%, so we are 6.2% below in our enrollment compared to these districts. Something else to notice in that percentage below comparable districts column right away is you'll see our central office admins in that top section are significantly below average, hitting double digits in a lot of cases, while our building admins are actually quite competitive down at the bottom. So what we did, we took that average column, and again, if I had three rates listed, I took that middle amount. We assumed a 5% increase is what these other districts would do. So we took that average amount, increased it 5%, and then we reduced it by that enrollment by 6.2%. Okay. The resulting amounts for that calculation is the first yellow column. And so in order to reach that first yellow column amount, our staff members would need the percentage increase listed in the second yellow column. And then again, you'll see this is where our top section of central office admins are quite elevated, where the building are pretty close to where they should be. So the average increase needed for central office admins came in at 14.7%. So those top 5 positions, if you took the average of that percentage, that's our 14.7%. So we are suggesting a 15% increase for those positions, which are the blue boxes. The average increase needed for building admins in the second section is 2.15%. Of course, that negative amount is reducing that percentage a bit. So we are suggesting a 4% increase for those staff members, and you will see that suggested amount in green. Any questions? Red empty boxes mean they didn't have that position. The gray boxes mean it was a dual role position.
No, I thank you for going through this in detail and pulling this information. You know, I think when we've gone through contracts with other staff members, when we went through Adam's contract, I'll use you as an example. I hope this is okay. If not, tell me.
It's public records.
Stop talking. I know, but, so, you know, we looked at, you know, what are superintendents making in the county and like districts and trying to bring our administrators up. I think there was a long time where we had staff, when we were in those years where staff didn't get raises and we had to give other things, and we asked them just to please hang on with us until we can get over this hump and, you know, get where we can be stable. And they, you know, stuck with us, and we were able to give them, it doesn't seem like huge things, but a little bit over the years. And we haven't been able to do that to our central staff and to our administrators, so or our superintendent. So I think it was fair they stuck in longer with not having anything, and now being able to give them something. I get those numbers seem huge, but I think the reality is these individuals could drive 5 miles and 5 to 10 miles in any direction and make a lot more. And I feel like we're really lucky to have the people we have. So I thank you for all the work you did to make this really data-driven and not just emotion-driven. Even though it is emotional, I wish we could pay a lot more. I really do, because everybody's working hard. So I thank you for all that work in the finance committee. Chris or Deb, anything you want to add on this?
No, I echo what you said. Sarah did a great job presenting it to the committee. I thought it was data-driven and definitely allows us to stay competitive in the market, which is good. We have many administrators that have been with us for quite a long time. Some new as well, but we definitely want to keep good talent, and I think this is a good way to be able to do just that. And attract new talent in the future too, so, I mean.
Well, the only, I guess, 2 points. One is, you know, again, going back to some of our more lean days based on the bar graph you saw earlier. Remember that we lowered admin salaries as part of that plan to get ourselves out of the situation we were in. So while this might look like a larger percentage than here, well, it is. It's a larger percentage by far than we're accustomed to seeing in this district. It's also compensating for a reduction that took place for these roles 6-7 years ago. So it kind of evens out. The last point I just want to mention quickly is the districts. The reason why we picked the districts we did, there's a company we contract with called IDEX, and it really is designed to help us with our number crunching and data analyses. Primarily, it works with our testing results, so we can assess how our our students are progressing compared to other districts. And there's a lot of cool analytics that it's capable of. But it also helps with some of the financial number crunching. And one of the things IDEX will do is they'll send out reports periodically, kind of looking at how you do compared to like districts. And so they're looking at enrollment, they're looking at academic success, they're looking at demographics. So these districts, and there were a few others, but some of them were kind of outliers. But these were primarily the districts that look most like us, and all successful schools. So anyway, that's the reason why these were selected. You'll notice Hazlitt removed at the top. Hazlitt is a comparable district to us, but when you're looking at financial comparisons, they have 500 or 600 more students times the per pupil funding allocation. Those numbers add up pretty quickly. So that would have skewed these results even further in the direction that Sarah was outlining. So we actually took Hazlitt out.
We did, so Hazlitt, even though they have higher salaries than us, that wasn't really offset by that decrease in enrollment that would be needed. So really that percentage of the 6.2 got bumped to like 11.7%. And if we did the same calculation, our building admins, I think, were showing as overpaid, which of course we're not gonna just not give them a bump. And then the percentages for our office staff were just was better to leave them off.
Well, I like this. I like how I like this being really more data-driven versus emotion, and I think that is very well explained, so I thank you for all that work. It's more
Yeah.
a color-coded chart.
It's
very
like
helpful.
color coding, it's perfect.
It is. You did a very nice job explaining, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Okay, I will get with Dave and Amanda. I know they're not here, but we're going to move this. Are we set to move this to our next board meeting? I don't know when. I know it's in April. I apologize. I don't know the exact date.
April 10th.
April 10th. So if you have any questions, please make sure you get with Adam or Sarah before that meeting. Okay, social media litigation. I love these.
So this litigation is very similar to the Jewel litigation that we are voting on tonight, but it focuses specifically on social media and the negative impacts that social media has had on youth. So basically this is a class action lawsuit that allows for districts to sign on for any potential of money that may come out of the lawsuit. It specifically targets Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and it says other social media platforms. So it's got a very wide swath of attack on social media. So I see this as very similar to the other one that we have signed on to, and it would be a similar idea, just a different focus. Adam, anything else you want to add on that?
No, and procedurally it'll be exactly the same. Fees are the same. Upfront costs, which are zero, are the same.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions about this? I see this needs to be done by May 10th. That gives us plenty of time to vote on it on April 10th to get whatever needs to be done.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? All right. Next, future ballot initiatives.
So I'm going to let Adam talk a little bit about both of these funds so that he can give you a little bit more insight. But both of these are current, the Headley hedge and the bond. I mean, we've had these for quite some time, and we need to take a look at adding them back to the ballot to be able to extend, in one aspect, the bond extension, to extend our bond, to be able to do needed updates to our facilities and other things within the district. And the Headley is a fund, is a fee that is collected from individuals who have multiple homes or own businesses, so a small number of individuals. But what we found, and Adam, I'll let you fix what I'm saying if I'm saying it wrong. But
Sarah.
Or Sarah.
If I'm saying it right.
But basically what's happened is that over time, the percentage that we typically would be getting, which is 18%, has decreased. So this Headley hedge would allow the district to be able to get the same percentage that the district was promised from the voters in the past, but basically getting us back to that 18%, even though over time it has gone a little bit below 18%. Did I explain that accurately, Adam? Do you want to talk a little bit more on both?
Sure. Well, the nice thing with both of these is, at least based on the committee's recommendations, we have plenty of time to go in and find additional information and get all your questions answered. So the first is it's an 18 mil operating millage that the state assumes as our baseline state funding. It's basically the local contribution if you're not claiming a homestead exemption. So this is, for most of us that own a home in Williamston, we don't pay this, right, because we claim that exemption. But if you had a second home in Williamston that you weren't claiming that exemption for, if you're a business owner, et cetera, then you contribute to that 18 mil baseline funding that the state assumes we are getting. And that's why periodically, and I believe the next one is in 2035, we have to go back to the voters and ask for a renewal of this. It's basically the millage that keeps the district operating. It's called the operating renewal millage. And all districts have this. It's a straight up 18 mils. Headley is a provision in the law in Michigan that as property values increase, it creates an automatic rollback in terms of property taxes that are being paid to compensate for that increase in property assessment. So what happens is over time, that 18 mils will roll back to a lesser percentage, 17 point something. So what that does is it's not allowing us to max out the 18 mils that the state assumes we're receiving from that funding. The board might think back to, it seems like a lifetime ago, but just prior to COVID, like shutting down the schools in 2020, like literally 3 weeks before that, the county initiated a Headley rollback for the special education millage in Hingham County. And so all of Hingham County voted on that millage restoration, which rolled back the Headley decrease that occurred over a number of years. That significantly benefited our district in terms of additional revenue earmarked to support special education. I don't remember exactly the percentage, but it was like 75% of the county voted and supported that. It was pretty decisive. So this is a similar situation. Over time, that 18 mils is eroding, and what a Headley restoration initiative would allow is for the district to put that back at the 18 mils that the state assumes we're receiving from the local community. There's two ways you can go about this. One is a Headley restoration, which just moves it from the 17 mils and change. Exactly what that would be will depend on the time of the ballot initiative. And that just pushes it back to 18, and then almost immediately it'll start to erode again until 2035 when we go back for renewal. The other option is something called a Headley hedge. And this gets a little complicated to explain, but basically what it does is if the voters approved it, it would have our 18 mils plus a little bit of extra. That little extra, let's just say for the sake of conversation, it's 18.15. Taxpayers want to pay that 0.15. What would happen is as the Headley 18 mils starts to erode between the point where this is passed and the next time we go for our operating millage renewal, every time it erodes a little bit, that extra 1.5 backfills that, so it bumps it back up to 18. So these are just pretend numbers, but if it decreases to 17.99 mils after the first year, you would pull one of those hundreds off of that, put it back, and would just push it back up to 18. So it's not asking taxpayers to pay more than the 18 mils, it just automatically pushes it back up to the 18 mil level that the state assumes we're receiving as our baseline operating fund. So there's two options you can do. The committee is leaning towards a hedge, which would just draw from that savings, so to speak, until we go back, I think it's in 2035, if I'm not mistaken, 2035, and renew the whole thing again. Is that a good summary?
That was good.
Made sense to me, yes.
Much better than mine.
No, you both did great.
So one, is it okay if I talk about the election dates?
Yeah.
So the committee's recommendation, and they could maybe speak to the rationale, why that time frame was picked, but one caveat with that is, this is the state presidential primary, and part of the reason for picking a date like this is to offset the cost of the election. If you can split it with other ballot initiatives, the district doesn't have to pay the entire cost for running the election. But the caveat with this is Michigan's presidential primary is kind of up for debate in terms of when it's going to be. There's some discussion about maybe moving it to March, and so we don't know exactly when that election will be held. But again, it's going to be one of those 2 months, most likely. But the good piece is there's plenty of time. Once the filing deadline is established in advance, then our attorneys would draft a resolution. That resolution would come in front of the board, would have all the fine print. You know, if you're going for a hedge, how much of the hedge would you like to put into that initiative? And all that would be done well in advance of the filing deadline, once the actual election date is established. So just a quick caveat of the uniqueness of that March, February 2024 option.
Well, and I'll put in that the reason for about the year difference in between the two was that we felt like we needed at least a year between elections to be able to not put everything onto the voters during the same academic year, or not academic year, but the same
Correct.
calendar year. Plus the bond extension is going to, really it comes down to, there's an extension or there could be an increase depending on what the board decides to do. And we have to decide what that's going to do. We wanted to give Adam enough time to be able to work with architects and others to be able to come up with a plan for what we truly need to be asking for. And that will determine whether or not we really need to be asking for an extension, which would be, was it 35 million? Is that right?
It's
Approximately?
approximately a little less than 30 million. for
30
the bond
million.
extension.
And what we kind of talked about in the meeting was 30 million doesn't go that far anymore. So if we're talking about we need a new Explorer Elementary, you might be able to build that for $30 million, but everything would be used by just that. So the question becomes where the priorities are, how much those priorities will be, and then bringing that to the board for a decision of, are we asking for an extension? Are we asking for an increase? What does that look like? And we need time to be able to roll that out, to be able to get that in front of voters and be able to make sure that everyone is understanding what that means in general.
When does this bond expire in 2025, or is it 2026?
2003.
Well, it's not when it expires, it's when it's paid off.
It's paid off.
That gets fairly complicated.
Yeah.
And it's, depending on the numbers you look, it could be like 2030
Yeah.
or even later.
Okay.
Can I make two more quick points though about the hedge?
Yes, absolutely.
They're kind of important pieces. One is how much money does this actually bring in for the district? And it's not a lot in the aggregate. It's a little less than $20,000 annually. And the second piece I would point out with the hedge is, or the rollback, or nothing, depending on what the board decides to do. The vast majority of folks in Williamston don't pay this, right? Again, it's, I have one house, it's in Williamston, I don't pay this. But for those who do, that's the communication piece, right? So it takes a little bit of explaining, especially if you went with a hedge, because it's gonna look like an increase at face value, even though it's not. Just to make sure that everyone's aware of what it is and what it isn't. But it is important to point out to the board that the ballot initiative, if it were to pass, is bringing in roughly $20,000 annually that we're losing because of the Headley rollback.
It's still something.
The bond extension, the second point, completely different and much more complicated initiative. By the board coalescing around the date, which is really all we're kind of trying to get an informal agreement tonight that you're in favor of this date. You're not approving anything because the resolutions still have to come to you for discussion and approval. But what the date allows our attorneys to do and our financial planners are to go out and submit requests for proposals for architects and project managers. So they can bid on this once they know the ballpark time or the exact time where the initiative is going to take place. So it allows the process to get started. You could still back out of that later. So if you pick a date and then a year from now you're like, we don't want to do that, and you haven't passed the resolution already, we're not out anything. But to really get the planning process going and to bring in RFPs that the board can look at, to really get the architectural ideas going and a project manager that can help kind of start to get the momentum moving forward with this, we need to know the date if you're in favor of this concept. So.
Well, and you had asked the question about when it ends, and if it does end in 2030, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is we really need to either extend or renew prior to that ending, because it causes a lot more issues if we don't.
Correct. And we are really good, I mean, I'm in favor of having plenty of planning time because we're really good at passing extensions. In the past, it has taken us a couple years to pass. If we're doing a whole new bond or needing to add some. So the planning and being like very transparent with what we're using the money for. Any planning we can do upfront is always effective. So, per any other question, does anybody have any other questions about what these are? So Adam and the Finance Committee, you're basically asking us to move this for action April 10th and basically kind of solidifying these dates,
Well, so
or kind of the window of these dates?
you won't actually vote on them until you have a resolution in front of you that our
Okay.
attorneys will draft up. So I guess there's two things. So one with the Headley rollback restoration piece, you have 6 months before you really need to get a resolution in front of you or close to it. So we just want to making sure at this point, if we're going to continue to work with our attorneys to kind of get all that stuff together, that you're at least conceptually on board with the idea. You're not really voting for it because you don't have the numbers and all the legal nuance in front of you tonight. We won't have it in front of you in April either.
Okay. But
The same,
concept.
the date, or just the general concept, like, do you want us to move forward with this? If there's opposition tonight, then, we'll just let it go, and that's fine. But you have plenty of time to get the fine print in front of you and consider this before you actually vote it, because you would need a resolution to do so. The bond extension, again, you're not approving anything tonight. If you wanted to approve anything in April, what we're looking for, though, is just kind of a green light to move forward with starting the request for proposals process. So, but they can't do that until at least you have a date that you're at least conceptually on board with. Again, you're not committing to anything tonight. This is not an official ballot initiative. You're not voting on anything in April. It'll allow us to get the RFP process going, and then bring back those details to you later that have all the specifics, the bids, and then obviously a formal resolution that you would have for discussion and a vote at a later time.
Okay, so thoughts on moving forward with this, allowing the Finance Committee, looking at these kind of a year apart, giving us kind of an idea of these dates, and moving forward with this process? Sarah's good, Julie?
Yes.
Good, Deb, we're all good? Okay, I can also, actually, I'm gonna ask, do you feel comfortable reaching out to Amanda and Dave and kind of having this conversation with the five of us all?
Well, Amanda's on board because she's on the.
Oh, that's right,
I
okay.
can talk to Dave.
If you can talk to Dave. But as long as we're good, I think we move forward, and the more time we have to plan, the better. If you have any questions or concerns, I would reach out to someone on the Finance Committee, Sarah or Adam.
Yeah, the word's kind of slowly getting out already about the bond extension, because I've already had people bringing me ideas or
Yeah.
bringing up stuff that's broken, that needs to get replaced. So I'm sure we will be able to put any funds to good use.
Yes,
But
and-
it's a long process, and this is just kind of giving us a tentative green light to start the work, to bring you more details later.
Okay, I am ready for a motion for our consent calendar.
I make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on March 6, 2023 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, so first Sarah, second Chris, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wrote that on the wrong page. Sorry. The next is sorry, I'm still writing. The next one is a roll call vote on the approval of the Jewel resolution. This is pretty long, so I'm gonna ask everybody to kind of hang in with us. Do I have a motion to approve the Jewel resolution?
Whereas the district is a plaintiff in the lawsuit against Juul Labs Incorporated, Juul, and other vaping product defendants, specifically case number 319 MD 2913 WHO in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California lawsuit. Number two, certain lawsuit defendants established a court-supervised settlement program to resolve the lawsuit against them, specifically Juul and Juul-related parties, as specified in the settlement program. Number three, pursuant to the settlement program, the district may accept the gross settlement amount reflected in attachment 1 of the settlement amount, including in exchange for the district releasing its claims against Juul and Juul-related parties, the Juul defendants. Number four, if the district fails to accept this settlement amount and to sign settlement documents, its claims against the Juul defendants will continue, which may result in the district expending significant time and cost pursuing its claims, and which may result in no recovery from the Juul defendants. Number five, the district's claims against the non-Juul defendants in the lawsuit will continue, notwithstanding a settlement with the Juul defendants. Number six, the board believes that it is in the district's best interest to accept the settlement amount and to authorize and direct the district superintendent or designee to sign settlement documents pertaining to the Juul defendants on behalf of the district, and to take such other actions as necessary to obtain the settlement amount and to settle the lawsuit against the Juul defendants, subject to review and approval by the district's legal counsel. Now therefore be it resolved that 1, the board accepts the settlement amount. 2, the board authorizes and directs the district superintendent or designee to sign lawsuit settlement documents pertaining to the Juul defendants on behalf of the district, and to take such other action as necessary to obtain the settlement amount and to settle the lawsuit against the Juul defendants, subject to review and approval by the district's legal counsel. 3, the board waives any applicable board policies and bylaws for purposes of this settlement. 4, all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
Second?
Thank you.
Deborah? Roll call.
Yes.
It's a roll call vote.
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes?
Christopher?
Yes?
Sarah?
Yes.
Julie? Yes.
All right,
So
motion
moved.
passes. Thank you. All right, we have some separate action items. Can I have a motion for the network switch replacement?
I make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the purchase of network hardware and software to replace all district-owned network switches for an amount not to exceed $120,000.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Can I have a motion to approve the Williamston High School Theater Production Spring Play?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve Radium Girls by D.W. Gregory as the spring play for the Williamston High School theater production class.
Second.
Second, Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I please have a motion to approve the renewal of administrator contracts?
I make a motion to renew administrator contracts as presented.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Okay, the next is the renewal of our board goals. You guys can read them there, we've gone over them. We do not have any correspondence, and we do not have any citizens right now. Any board member reports or requests at this time?
I
do
just
wanna
wanted to
say-
mention one thing.
No, go ahead.
I went to the evening of jazz and thought it was really wonderful, delightful. I'm glad that I went. And I was glad to see people from the community that don't have children in the schools here that were attending, and they were excited about the whole evening. One thing I thought about later is the number of artists in this community is very high for a small community, and maybe in the future they could get works of art from, who's a retired art teacher, Paul Nielsen, sculpture, Sharon Tarr is a fabulous watercolor. If either of them had things in there, I would have been bidding on them, and it would attract more people to it if they knew that local artists also had contributed to that. So it's just something to think about, but I
That
just
is a
think
good idea. I know the
would
lady
be
who
better.
does that, and I would, I'll put that out to her. That's a good idea.
I don't know if I.
No,
It's
absolutely
not a
not.
discussion item. I do want to point out that the Evening of Jazz is a fundraiser for a booster organization, so it's not a district sponsored event, just for the record.
Okay.
But it's a great idea, and I
Okay.
can definitely convey, just want to make sure. that-
Right, so just making that suggestion of, she's
Yep.
always looking, the woman who kind of organizes that is always looking for donations and crazy things and anything and everything that she can get her hands on, she uses donations. So that is a really good idea. I have to write it down, sorry. Anything else?
Had a great state solo and ensemble. I'm sure we'll talk more about it in April when Adam gets more results, but I know that quite a few our students did very well, and it was a nice day at Oak Miss High School to celebrate that.
Yeah, some families posted some of their kids, and it's crazy for knowing that a lot of those kids started learning their instrument or practicing during COVID over Zoom or however that worked, and they sounded fabulous, so that was really nice. Also, I'm not sure, Heather Lewis sent us a thank you note, but then added some videos. I don't know if any of you had any chance to
Yeah.
watch them, but they
We
were,
watched it today, it was good.
yeah, they were really good, so just if you have a chance to watch those. Being someone who's still not in her house right now, I'm like hitting that red like Adam is sometimes, so.
Not working in the green, are ya?
I'm trying to get more into that green, but I'm hitting that red a lot more these days, so.
Well, she gave some good strategies.
She did. I was like, I think at one point I was talking to Sarah and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to let you go. She's like, gee, your strategy's in the green. I'm like, good. I wanted to say bite me, but. Like, calm on down.
That's not a green word.
I know, I'm like breathing, it's okay. I also do wanna say, I was in school today, and being a teacher, and knowing what it's like to have these snow days and days off and days on, and knowing that we've coming into spring break and having days off last week, and knock on something, and I can't even believe I'm gonna say this out loud, but the buildings were just super calm today. I went and read in a classroom, they all were really
Well,
engaged
and it's the week before spring break, so
Yeah.
for
Like
you
thinking
to
that
say
everyone's
that,
gonna be
yeah, I
crazy.
know.
I'm like, why did I pick the week before, but,
Well, I'm going in on Thursday to read, so I'll
so
report back to
maybe,
you
let me
then.
know, but, it was really fun, that took me right over into the green, so. All right, if there's not anything else, I will take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned, have a great week.
And a lovely spring break.